Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome back to the Think Factory podcast. My name is Alka Bahal, and I am your co-host with my partner, Christopher Santomassimo. And welcome to my very first podcast.
It's a pleasure to be part of it.
Oh, thank you for having me and for letting me co-host with you today.
Absolutely. Now, I thought it was time not only to spotlight what you do in corporate immigration services, but to talk about the upcoming conference that you're going to speak at.
Yeah.
Be one of the thought leaders on it.
I welcome that opportunity. So I'll be speaking at the annual AILA, that's the American Immigration Lawyers Association conference this June. It's our really big annual conference. We get somewhere between 6,000 to 8,000 attendees of immigration lawyers. It's a lot of immigration lawyers in the United States, isn't it? And I'll be speaking there about consular processing. So what consular processing is, after somebody's in the U.S. or abroad gets the actual visa, they get an approval from the immigration services here in the U.S., there's another step to be done, which is to go to your local consulate, have an interview, get your visa stamped, and then you get to come into the U.S. So it's maybe a little unknown piece of the visa process. And so
it's not just something you do over the internet, right?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
No, you can make your appointment over the internet, and just like all sort of customer service things, you can't talk to a human being anymore. You just got to use those interfaces that they come up with. And for whatever reason, the government never wants to employ H-1B employees. So they have these sort of antiquated systems and software.
Do they just test people's will or to actually come?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You go to the consulate, wait for a few hours for a 4-minute interview.
Well, welcome to working with the federal government,
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
It's all about the red
Is
tape.
there actually some substantive reason they do that other than just to make it not so easy?
There definitely is. What they're really primarily looking for is detecting fraud. They want to know, is the individual who's applied for this visa the same as the person whose credentials were submitted to immigration? Is there really, for example, in a work visa, a bona fide job offer? Is there an existing company? Are there local criminal issues that weren't disclosed that the consulate could discover, before sending the person? So they're really looking for truth. They're looking for, is there fraud in the process? Are you who you say you are? And is all this information that's in the visa petition really true? Or did your lawyer or someone else just concoct it and file it? And the human being who's at the consulate has no idea what's going on.
Right. Well, that could happen, right? They put up somebody, right? And there's actually a nefarious reason they're doing it.
That's correct. That's correct. The government is particularly concerned about fraud, especially in the H-1B context. They're trying to sort of jimmy these H-1B visas just to bring people. So there are some consulates that are actually known as high fraud consulates, where they're more aware of fraud than in others. For example, you might imagine that in India, where we're sending hundreds upon thousands of people in a year, there's a higher rate of fraud than there is from, say, Sweden, where we're sending maybe 1,000 people. I don't know, that's just numbers I've made up. But there are consulates where there's more fraud than there are in others, and so they tend to sort of take a more scrutinizing approach.
Yeah, so they have a higher level of scrutiny in those particular places as a result, right?
Correct. And sometimes your legitimate applications can get caught up in these screening processes, and then it can be hard to untangle them. So even where you as the lawyer know things are legitimate, it can take time to undo them. If somebody gets caught in something called administrative processing, they could be held up in their home country for an additional 30 days. Now, that might not be so painful when the person's coming here to start work and you have to defer a start date, but imagine when a person goes home for vacation for 2 weeks and they need to renew their visa stamp to come in, and now they're stuck in India for 30 days, 60 days. It becomes difficult.
What are some of the things that you, as an experienced immigration lawyer, could do to help resolve some of those issues, or maybe set the visa application on a good footing from the beginning?
Yeah, so number one with all immigration processing is good documentation. So having a nice, clear package, outlining everything, having all the elements that need to be there, number one, most important thing, because you're handing this to the consular officer. You're also filing this with immigration, and they want to be able to go through their check boxes and just check everything off. Is everything I need for this visa to be approved here or not? And the second thing is you want your client, who could either, your employer and your employee, to know what's going on, know what your job is, know your own credentials, and make sure you can speak to them. In some cases, we do sort of kind of adjust how we do our packages depending on the person. Some people are confident and bold and can speak for themselves when they're going to a consulate or when they're entering the U.S., and others are not. And so sometimes we want to tailor how we coach them if they aren't confident. If they're, for example, coming in under a work visitor's visa, as a business entrant. They're not actually going to be doing work here, but they're coming for business purposes. Usually, if it's the CEO of a company, they're confident. They can explain who they are. They have a business card. It's not that big of a deal. Sometimes you may have an engineer who's coming in on behalf of the business, and they're just going to be consulting with the engineering team. But, these are individuals who are used to working in their little cubicles all on their own. They don't want to interact with people, and they feel intimidated talking to these, powerful, officials, and it becomes tough. So we want to counsel them a little bit. We might recommend more coaching for them so that they can practice and be prepared when they have to talk about what they do.
Well, sometimes when people don't appear confident, that's when they start to raise suspicion at the consulate, right?
Exactly. You start hemming and hawing. It makes you sound like you don't know what you're doing. A universal thing with immigration and with all federal officials really is their first presumption is you're doing something wrong, right? There's something negative to what you're doing. So if you're hemming and hawing or you're not speaking up, they think you're trying to cover up something. The first thought isn't, oh, they're shy or they're, intimidated. Their first thought is what's wrong here.
Yeah, the consulates, the local consulates, are those local employees? For example, if you're in India, would they be Indian folks, or would they be a combination of Indian folks and expats from the United States?
It'll be a combination.
Gotcha. So that, the American folks that got, or the United States citizens that got sent there to work at the consulate may not even appreciate the local culture as much as the local folks and therefore be more suspicious, right?
It's possible. Yeah. It's possible. And that's typically true when you have newer consular officials there who haven't really had the time to acclimate. One of the obligations when you do work in an embassy or a consulate abroad is that you speak the language of that country and that you do learn about the culture. But that takes time, and if you have somebody who's relatively new, knowing things on paper and knowing things when you live them are two different things.
Right. And the language being one of them, right? You may not really understand the local dialect as well as you thought until you're immersed in it.
Correct. And in India, there are so many different dialects. So even if let's say the top 3 languages, you're still not going to capture everyone. There's just hundreds of dialects.
Are they so different? I'm just curious. In India, are they so different that someone who understands the top 3 may not really be able to communicate with the one who speaks the 4th?
Yeah, it's possible.
They're that different, huh? Well, see, I told you, you're teaching me something new every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So just at a high level, what are some of the other things about the consulate experience or consular experience that folks ought to keep in mind?
So for employers, one of the really important things to keep in mind is that the wait times to get an appointment can be difficult at consulates. So you have to really plan ahead. If you're either bringing an employee over for the first time or you have an employee who's on a visa and they're going to be traveling, you want to be able to have them looking at the systems and making their appointments in advance. That's number one, because certainly during COVID, it was crazy, right? The consulates were closed. You couldn't get appointments. And then depending on the type of visa, now most consulates have caught up. But, when last year, for example, there were consulates where if you wanted to get a visitor's visa, either for business or pleasure, you were looking at 700-day wait to get an appointment.
Wow.
Now the waits can really vary depending on the season, right? During busy season, which is going to be Christmas, holidays, where everybody's traveling, everybody wants a visa. You could be looking at 2 months, 3 months to get an appointment. So you really want to be able to plan ahead. Otherwise, your employee's not going to be back to work when you expect them to. So that's an important factor to remember. The second is that consular issuance, visa issuance is not automatic. It is possible that they don't get approved right away. And that's not necessarily because they've done something wrong or because their paperwork is incomplete, which could happen, right? But even when everything is just right, there are those few cases that get pulled for the administrative processing, and there's not much you can do. You simply are stuck without your employee until they can come back and get the visa process done.
Right. Well, for lawyers that might listen to the podcast, tell them a little bit about the AILA conference, where you're going to speak, when you're going to speak, and how they can check it out.
So the AILA conference is this year being held in Chicago. It'll be May 12th through 16th. I'm speaking on May 12th at about 4 p.m. And I'll be talking about this visa issuance, consular processing. But the AILA conference covers a wide variety of topics, all things immigration, from the business side to asylees and refugees and deportation and you name it. One of the things I find the most beneficial about AILA is the networking. I'll be meeting with a lot of government officials, local people who are in the state and who are also at the federal level. I won't be ashamed to admit that I have used those connections at times to move cases along where it's been necessary. So it's one of the real great benefits of the AILA conference. It's that networking. They don't necessarily always just meet with anyone. So that's a nice benefit. So for all those lawyers out there who don't practice immigration, you can find me on the OGC website, ogcsolutions.com, or at abahal@ogcsolutions.com. And I'm happy to answer questions for clients that are either have foreign national personnel that aren't really sure about something that's going on, or if they need to bring over foreign national personnel, always around to give some advice and help counsel clients.
Well, I learned that it's actually quite the honor, I think, to be selected to speak at the AILA conference. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
I don't think it's your first time, but
no, it's not. It's
yeah,
not.
It's great.
But it's still an honor.
Sometimes it's actually more of an honor to be selected again, because that means you did a pretty good job the first time. Exactly.
Yeah, they didn't hate it the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good thing.
So, well, again, congrats.
Thank you.
Well, anybody who's listening, I said this on the last podcast episode too, but Alka is probably one of the easiest lawyers to get along with. She's helpful, always got a smile, but definitely got a ton of information when it comes to the whole process from beginning to end when it comes to corporate immigration. So please take her up on her offer to answer those questions, especially if you can't make it to the AILA conference.
Thank you, Chris.
So, well, thank you for joining us for the podcast today. Again, I'm the number 2 on this one, behind Alka. So take it away, Alka.
Thank you for joining us today. This is Alka Bahal and Chris Santomassimo signing off on the Think Factory podcast. Join us next time.